Good morning and welcome back to the Planet Doug podcast. As always, I'm your host, Doug. This is the story of Planet Doug, everything that is going on behind the scenes, a story in audio form. And it is Friday, November 22nd, about 5:30 in the morning, and I'm inside my hotel room in Tanjung, Balai. I'm staying at a lovely low-budget style hotel called the Hotel Malahayati. I've actually been here for quite a while now, and I'm sitting inside nice and dry and warm, enjoying a good cup of instant coffee, and I'm listening to the rain thundering down outside. It's been a pretty common weather pattern lately. It's been raining heavily. I haven't really been monitoring the news, but it wouldn't surprise me if there was flooding going on all across Indonesia, or at least all across Sumatra. I think the rainy seasons are different on every island, and even Sumatra has different weather patterns depending on whether you're talking about the east coast, the west coast, north, south. So I don't really know what's going on elsewhere, but I can tell you that right here, the rain just never stops. It just rains all the time, particularly in the morning. There's a heavy rainfall, almost like clockwork lately, and I'm listening to the rain right now. So the big thing going on in my life, of course, is that this is my last day in Tanjung Balai, my last day in Sumatra for this trip, because, of course, I have the very pleasant detour of going to Jakarta to meet up with a Planet Doug subscriber who, reached out to me. A mystery benefactor has been monitoring me and my channel for a while, has seen all of my struggles with technology, laptops in particular, and like the ability to edit video. And then he said in his message, I would like to buy you a laptop. So I'm on my way to Jakarta. I'll be staying in Jakarta for 2 nights and meeting up with my mystery benefactor, and he will be, we're going to hang out a bit, and he's presenting the Planet Doug YouTube channel with a brand new Asus TUF A16 laptop, specially spec'd out for editing video, and that will be a relief. I'm really looking forward to that. Yeah, it's such an unusual time in my life right now to do something like this. The original plan, of course, was to come here. You get a 30-day visa on arrival, and I got mine as an e-visa, and I'm still not clear whether I can even extend it online or not, but that was the original idea, was to extend that visa for an additional 30 days. But since I have to go to Jakarta, I crunched the numbers and crunched the dates and crunched visa expiry dates and everything else that's going on in my life. And to get from here to Jakarta, it makes more sense, and it's cheaper and it's easier to do that by going back to Malaysia. There's a whole bunch of reasons for that. I won't go into all of them. I've already talked about them. But, I mean, I have a choice. I could stay in Indonesia and fly domestically. I don't have to leave the country, obviously. I could somehow get from here to Jakarta. I could fly. I could go by bus if I wanted to do an extremely long and exhausting bus ride. There are even options to go by boat. You can take a boat from the city of Medan to Jakarta. That would be a little bit of an adventure. So there are options to stay in Indonesia. I could fly from Medan, which is the most obvious thing to do. But then when I looked at all of the circumstances, what all of that would entail, it's actually a lot easier just to go back to Port Dickson by ferry and then fly from Kuala Lumpur to Jakarta. But the way the dates work out, because my visa is expiring on Sunday, I have to leave now. And I have a ferry booked for tomorrow morning. So my ferry to Malaysia is leaving Saturday morning, leaves at 7 in the morning. They told me I have to be at the dock at 5, which basically means getting up at 3 or something like that, in 3 or 4, depending on your how long it takes you to do these things, to get ready in the morning, how much you like to relax. And I like to relax a lot in the morning. So tonight, Friday night, it's a coin toss whether I'll be getting any sleep at all. I'll get a little bit. That's one reason I'm sitting here talking to you on this podcast this early in the morning at 5:30. So I've already been up for a while. And the idea is to wake up really early this morning, which I do often anyway. It's not a hardship. And then I'll have a full day today, and then I'll just go to bed early, like as early as possible. And then I'll wake up at 2 or 3, or at least I'll get out of bed at 2 or 3. And then I make my way to the dock by 5:30. And the boat will be leaving at 7. 5-hour journey. And that would get me back to Port Dickson at 5, assuming it's a 5-hour journey. With the time difference, I should be arriving there at 1. And at the moment, the plan is to stay one night in Port Dickson, just because I'm going to be exhausted when I arrive. And then the next morning, I'll go to Kuala Lumpur. And I already have my usual hotel in KL booked for the week. I thought about trying to do something else, stay somewhere else, go somewhere else, but it just isn't a whole lot of time, and I've got to do things like apply for my new Indonesian e-visa, and I'm still working nonstop on the Patreon. So I have things to do, and it's the easiest thing, and it makes the most sense just to get from Port Dickson to KL, stay there for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, like for the week, basically, and then I think on Saturday I fly to Jakarta. So basically tomorrow morning, ferry to Malaysia, 1 week in Malaysia, and then flight to Jakarta. Oh yeah, that's right, I still don't know how to get from Jakarta back here, because my plan is still to go on a bit of a bike tour in Sumatra, and so I have to return here because I'm leaving my bike behind. It's becoming a habit of mine. I go somewhere with my bike, and then I put my bike into storage, and then leave again, and I'm doing it once more, which is kind of funny. But yeah, the people here at this hotel said, yeah, sure, just leave your bike here. And I told them I'd be back in a week. So who knows? Maybe the rain will stop in a week as well. But I am a bit of a rain god. Everywhere I go, the rain follows me. So that's nothing unusual. So that is what is going on. A lot of little details about that going on in the background, but yeah, that's the overall picture. And over the last few days, I've been continuing to work on my big project, which is Patreon. And I guess here in the podcast, I'll talk about that for a little bit, because it is the big thing that's on my mind. The main project, the next step anyway, was to physically create the Patreon tiers. I've been spending a lot of time just figuring out how to upload content. Like, how does that work on Patreon? Because you wouldn't know it. I mean, if you go to most YouTube channels and check out their Patreon page, you would think you really can't do anything on Patreon, because all you see is bonus videos and early access, and then announcements. And that's all I really see on Patreon for YouTubers anyway. They don't do anything else with it. You can see, if you go through their feed, you'll see early access. So when they post a video, members of their Patreon get to watch it first. They post it, to be honest, they never say how early. It could be 1 hour early access, or 1 day, or 1 week, or 1 month. I really have no idea. In my case, for Planet Doug, offering early access, to me, it doesn't make a lot of sense. I can't think of any reason why I would want to do that. So early access to anything is not part of the Planet Doug Patreon. But most YouTubers, they try and think of, okay, I have a Patreon, and they think of their Patreon mainly as a place where people can support them financially on a subscription on a monthly or annual basis. And that's wonderful, that's fine. But then when it comes to giving something back to their patrons, they tend to have a couple of, like a bonus video once a month, like a Q&A live stream perhaps, and then early access, and that's pretty much it. And then they might post something there, an announcement about what's going on with their Patreon. But that seems to be the limit. And my approach has been significantly different. I've been planning to turn it into a much more active place, and I've been working on that. And in my mind, I broke it down into, I guess, it's a little bit more complicated than I would like, I suppose. But in terms of tiers, I mean, there's a free membership. And again, on almost every Patreon I visited, there is no free anything. You can join a Patreon for free, but you don't get anything. You can't see anything. You can't do anything. And as a free member, all that happens is you get emails notifying you when that person has posted to Patreon. But then, of course, if you go to look at whatever it is they posted, it's locked, and you have to pay and join one of the paid tiers in order to see it, whether it's a video or anything else. So the free membership offers nothing. And my idea was to turn the free membership into a social media feed. So I would post links to interesting things on the internet, things that I'm thinking about, links to other videos on YouTube that I watched and I found interesting and I have something to say about them. So a link to a news article that I thought was interesting, something going on around the world. Pictures. Today, like right now, if I take a picture of the rain outside and I want to write about it, I'll take a picture. Instead of posting it to Instagram, I'll just post it to Patreon, write a little paragraph about it. Anything that's going on in my life, I'm out having lunch and I want to take a picture of my meal. Instead of taking a picture of my meal and posting it to Facebook, I'll post it to Patreon. If I have a random thought, something that just jumps into my head, something funny, something interesting, I will jot it down on Patreon instead of bothering my friends with all of my random thoughts all day long. So that was my idea for the free membership, was to turn it into kind of a social media platform for Planet Doug. And this ties in with my idea of creating more of a Planet Doug community on Patreon. And then the tier number 1, which I've chosen a planet theme. So tier number 1 is the forest planet. And my idea there was to make the centerpiece my journal, this audio journal in particular, the behind-the-scenes stories. That will be the centerpiece of the forest planet, the first tier. Plus a bunch of other things, like little things that I would normally put onto as a bonus clip, relive, for example. I'll put that onto the first tier. And then the second tier, which I'm currently calling the city planet, if someone becomes or chooses to go live on the city planet, the centerpiece of that tier are bonus videos. So if I shoot an extra video, like behind-the-scenes content, for example, when I was in Port Dickson, I shot a lot of videos as I was setting up my bicycle, putting my bike together, mounting cameras on the bike, testing it, all this behind-the-scenes, technical, logistical, gear-oriented content. Here in Port Dickson, I went out shopping for a kettle. And now I turned that into a Planet Doug video because I was out exploring the town at the same time on my bicycle. So that was the story of the video, was buying my bicycle because I'm out in the city riding around, having experiences. But then I also shot a 20-minute video of me back in my room. I plug in the kettle for the first time, boil water, talk about the kettle, how much I love it, all of its features, and then I have a cup of coffee. The first cup of coffee with my new kettle. And originally I just shot that as part of the main video, but then the video ends up being an hour and a half long. So I thought, why don't I take that 20-minute segment of me just trying out the kettle and make that a bonus video for the city planet people. So that and then there's a whole bunch of other stuff there. But basically the centerpiece of The City Planet is bonus videos, behind the scenes videos, plus, of course, the journal, because they also have access to everything in the Forest Planet. And then the third level, the third tier, the Ocean Planet, is more of what they call a general support tier. It's there not so much to provide more content, but to allow people who wish to do so to support Planet Doug a little bit more, so that the tier monthly subscription is a little bit higher. But to make it interesting, I thought I could use that as a place to put 360 videos, because I occasionally have those extended cuts of the regular Planet Doug videos, POV walking around videos. So these would be more behind the scenes videos, but not really behind the scenes. They're more like new versions of the original Planet Doug video. They're just longer with basically deleted scenes. Everything that I removed from the original Planet Doug video, I keep it for the extended cut on the Ocean Planet. And then the Mountain Planet is very much a personal connection between me and someone who really wants to support what I'm doing. One-on-one chat, things like that. So basically, my idea overall is to make the Patreon much more active. Oh, I didn't talk about this yet, but there would also, there's audio posts, video posts, photo posts, written posts, links, like link posts. So all of those different types of content should be on Planet Doug, and Patreon allows you to do that. And I recently learned in the last couple of days, there's also a chat window on Patreon. So I was thinking about setting up a private Planet Doug WhatsApp group, and then I would interact with people on WhatsApp. But then I noticed that Patreon also has a chat window of its own. So I thought I would set that up and make that part of Planet Doug as well, keeping up with the community idea. So anyway, I was doing all of this testing of uploading content, figuring out how Patreon works, designing the tiers on paper, but I hadn't actually created any of these tiers on Patreon, and that's what I did over the last 2 days. So I started with the Forest Planet tier, the very first one, and it was a long process. It took me 2 full days. Maybe I started 3 days ago. At least 2 full days of work to get this done. You have to do it very slowly to figure out all the mechanics, because I didn't know. I was looking at Patreons and people list benefits and perks, so I just assumed there would be a text window, and all you do is write down the name of the tier, Forest Planet, and then you write down the monthly cost of that tier, the membership subscription, and then in a box you just start writing down what the tier is all about. You write a description of it and then list the benefits and perks. But they actually have a built-in system which makes a lot of sense, but I didn't know how it worked. So that when you go to offer a benefit, you actually have to go into a special menu, and then you click on options. They give you a list of options. So you can choose from a pre-selected list that they make for you, things like early access. I mean, these are all in kind of a list form, and you just click on them and say, okay, these are the benefits I want to offer. And you go through the checklist and go, okay, this one, this one, this one, and this one. And then each one has a category as well of what the purpose of it is. Okay, you offer a benefit, but then you have to put it into a category. What kind of benefit is this? And apparently this is the reason they do this is for tax purposes, because Patreon has to put a value on the items that you're offering people, and then based on the type of product and the value of that product, you fall into a different tax bracket. And then taxes are put on top of or taken out of that tier's membership, something like that. So yeah, so you have to do that. But then this each benefit gets entered officially, and then that works out pretty well, because then when you move on to the second tier, so I did that for the forest planet, and then I saved it. But then when I went to the second tier, the city planet, all those benefits were listed already. Because it wasn't just a text box where you typed everything out. It was actually saved as a special item inside the programming, inside the software. And then when you went to the city planet tier, then all of the benefits are already listed there. And you can decide which of those are available on the city planet. And then basically I just clicked all, because everything that's available on the forest planet will also be available if you happen to be living on the city planet. So I just clicked on all, and then you go through the menu system again and add more benefits. Then you move on to the ocean planet, and then all of those benefits are listed. And then you can decide which ones are available to people living on the ocean planet, and then on to the mountain planet. So it was quite well designed once you figured it out. But in all of my reading beforehand, nobody explained this to me. I watched all these tutorial videos, read all of these articles, but nobody ever said, oh, this is how it works. They just said, first you create your tier, then you add your benefits. And I was like, okay, but they didn't tell you how this happened. So the only way I learned was by actually doing it. And then it was suddenly like the light bulb went off again. It's like, oh, that's how it works. Man, I wish I knew that beforehand. But yeah, the only way to learn anything in the modern world is to do it. And it goes so against my nature. It really does. So this took a long time, in fact, because I had designed all of this on paper. But it feels different when you're actually choosing things, because now you're not setting it in stone. You can make changes to your Patreon, but of course, if you have members of your Patreon, people who have joined based on a set of benefits and perks and a certain structure and a certain design, you don't want to go monkeying around. So once you've set it up, offered it, and people have become members, well, you don't want to make a habit of going in there and saying, oh, this benefit, I don't like it anymore, let's delete it. Oh, let's move this one from the city planet to the forest planet. Oh, this benefit would work better at the mountain, on the mountain planet. So like, you don't want to start moving things around because people signed up in good faith based on what they saw was included on that planet. So as I was creating the tiers, getting ready for an official launch, I thought very deeply and carefully about each one. So for example, this audio journal, I wrote it, I chose a custom benefit, and then when you choose custom, you can write down whatever you want and choose a category. And then I wrote in Planet Doug Podcast. That is a benefit that's part of Patreon. And then you choose the category. I didn't know what category, but I called almost everything either bonus content or behind the scenes content. And this journal feels like it's behind the scenes content, because I'm telling you all the work that goes on to build the Patreon, to travel, to make travel arrangements, to make YouTube videos, all that kind of stuff. It's all behind the scenes. So I chose behind the scenes. And then as I was doing that, I was thinking, okay, is this the best place? Forest planet. Is this where I should put the audio journal? Should it be an audio journal? Should it even be part of Patreon? Because in the past, I created a completely separate YouTube channel, the Planet Doug Behind the Scenes channel, and I posted this as a video on a separate YouTube channel. And I love doing that. I really want to keep doing that, but I just don't have enough time. So anyway, as I was adding this, the Planet Doug podcast to the Forest Planet, I thought for a while, okay, does it make sense? Should I have it here? What should I call it? What works best? Etc., etc., all the little details. And then I would make a decision, and then I would move to the next item in my Patreon design and add it to the Forest Planet. And then I'd think about it. Okay, does this make sense? Should I keep it here? What should I call it? Because as soon as you do it for real, it feels different. It's one thing just to design things willy-nilly and write it down on paper, to type it into a Google Docs document. That's easy. But when you're actually doing it for real, your brain switches into a deeper gear, I think, and then comes to grips with it. Okay, does this really make sense? And then you see it more clearly. And then as I'm adding things, I really thought about it. And I went through my I've got this huge document, a Google Docs document called the Patreon Master Plan. And it's about 15 pages long, all of my notes and all of my thoughts and ideas. And then I went through my entire master plan line by line, and then I would add the bonus or the perk to the appropriate Planet Doug, or the appropriate planet, forest planet or city planet, and then thought about it deeply. And I made a lot of changes as I went along. In particular, I removed some benefits because as I was adding them, it really started to drive home how long this takes. So you have to be very careful about what you're promising, because you may promise so much you find that you can't actually deliver on what you're promising. So you have to be quite careful. And I was rethinking everything as I was doing it. And then I really rethought my strategy later in the day when I discovered something else, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So that's what I did over the last 2 days, and I completed it. But what I also had to do was create graphics, because when you put things on Patreon, like different tiers, if you look at Patreons in general, you'll see that they all have various graphics. Some of them are very high quality, some of them are very simple, and the best I can do is to choose a photo. So, and this took a long time. So for the Forest Planet, I went to my own photo archive online, and I started thinking, okay, I must have a picture of a forest somewhere. I thought for sure I would have photos of forests in Canada. So I went into my photo archive, and I'm looking through thousands and thousands of photos. I think in my archive, I have something like 200,000 pictures organized in various albums and collections. And I'm trying to find a beautiful picture of a forest. And I also wanted that forest picture to have people living in it, because I didn't want it to be just a forest. The idea is that on the Forest Planet, Patreons can live there. So I sort of wanted a beautiful picture of somebody living in a cabin in the forest, something like that. But I didn't have a picture like that. I couldn't find one. And then in my Canadian archive, I did have a lot of pictures of trees, of forests, but none of them were very good. They were taken decades ago with very poor camera equipment, or they were scans of photographs. Anyway, they were very low quality, and none of them looked very nice. And I had to go country after country after country, and I'm thinking it ended up being a huge walk down memory lane, because I went to Guatemala a couple of times in my life, and then I was looking at the photo archive from my time in Guatemala, and I'm sitting back and thinking, okay, what did I do in Guatemala? At any time, was I traveling through a forested area? Did I take a picture of the forest? I'm trying to remember, and then I'm going through all the photo albums looking for a picture of a forest in Guatemala. Then I couldn't find one. Then I thought, well, I went to India, and maybe there was a forest there. Was there one in Ethiopia, in Guinea? And I'm looking and looking and looking. And after a long time reminding myself of my life, I remembered that, while I was in Mae Sot, I got on this is in Thailand, I got on my scooter and I rode to a tourist attraction, a nearby attraction called the Petrified Forest. And I thought, petrified forest. These are all like trees that became like dinosaur bones, like they fell into the mud and got preserved, well, turned into stone, basically, just like dinosaur bones. And I thought, okay, that was a beautiful forested area. Did I get a nice picture of a forest there? Turns out I didn't get any good pictures there. And then I remembered I went to a national park, also near Mae Sot, where they have like what they call the tallest tree in Thailand or something like that. So I went there, went into that photo album, and there I found what I thought, well, at least for me, it was the most beautiful picture of a forest that I had in my collection. And there were a couple there. And I downloaded all my forest pictures from that national park, and then I used those. And then I had to somehow figure out the pixel size, because for a Patreon banner, you have to choose an aspect ratio. And on Patreon, they say, we recommend that your photos be 460 pixels by 200 pixels. So that's the resolution, and more important, that's the aspect ratio. So basically, it's 2.3 to 1 is the aspect ratio in terms of length versus width. Yeah, 2.3 to 1. So then I had to figure out how to take my photos and crop them to a 2.3 to 1 aspect ratio and set the resolution. So I figured out how to do that. I was lucky in that way. I happened to have a program I already had access to that could do that pretty easily. And then, of course, when I uploaded that photo to Patreon, it didn't look very exciting because it's just a picture of a forest. And you can't do a lot of custom design with the Patreon listing. It gives you a template, and you basically fill in the blanks of the template. So you can't really change a lot. Like way up at the top, it says something like choose or select membership level or something like that. But all this time, when I chose the planet theme, I had this idea that people who join my Patreon can choose what kind of planet to live on. So I always, at the very top, I had written something like, choose your planet. So that's what I wanted at the top. I wanted it to say in big letters, choose your planet. And then you see a list: forest planet, jungle planet, ice planet, mountain planet, lava planet, whatever planets I came up with. But on Patreon, you can't do that. You can't actually change the wording. But you can add this picture, there's a graphic, but then the graphic just sits there, and it didn't look very exciting. So then I thought, okay, I think I need to add some words. So then I figured out with a different program how I can put the word forest on the picture. And then, of course, that took a long time because I had to decide, well, how big are the letters? What font for the letters? Should I put a drop shadow on them? put on outline around them. What color for the lettering, what color for the outline, what color for the drop shadow. Should the drop shadow be 50% transparency or 30%? Anyway, it takes a long time to decide what looks good. And of course, you don't want the lettering to obscure the whole picture. And I'm not a graphic artist. I have no idea how to do any of these things. And so it took me a long time, but I eventually got it done. And then I had to move on to the city planet, and that was more challenging, to find a good picture of a cityscape that was suitable. And I eventually settled, right now anyway, I'm using a picture I took of Kuala Lumpur. It's of the Salome Bridge at night. So it's actually a nighttime picture of downtown KL I took from Kampong Baru, of the Salome Bridge, and then the Petronas Towers in the background all lit up. And I thought it looked pretty nice when I saw the picture, but on Patreon I'm thinking maybe it's too dark because it does have a lot of dark sky. But anyway, that's what I chose, and then I had to resize it, and then I put the word city across it. And that was very difficult to do because for that photo, the lettering covered up a lot of the photo. With forest, it worked better. I mean, you can still see the forest, but with the city picture, the word city, when you made it really big, it just, I don't know, kind of obscured the photo. And you couldn't really, it was covering up the Petronas Towers. The letter T was sitting right on top of the towers, and it didn't make the picture look very nice, I didn't think. But anyway, I had to fight with that for a while, and I eventually chose a design. And then I did the same thing for ocean. That took a long time because I do have a lot of ocean pictures because I've spent so much time in Asia, Southeast Asia, visiting a lot of beaches in Thailand, in the Philippines, in Malaysia, everywhere. And I went through in my entire archive looking for the best ocean tropical island paradise photo. But again, what I wanted, and I couldn't find it, which was really frustrating, I wanted a beautiful picture of a beach and an ocean that gives the impression you're on an island, and I wanted buildings to show that people live there. But I couldn't find one that I really liked. I downloaded dozens of them, all of them as potential choices, but I eventually settled on a photo that's a lot simpler. It doesn't really have a beach, but it is a sandbar. This was from the island of Camigan in the Philippines. I went there for a short trip a long time ago, and they have one of these offshore sandbars that at low tide, the sand breaks the surface of the water, and you essentially get islands of sand out in the middle of the ocean. And then you can go out there on boats during the day. It's kind of it's a tourist attraction. And they put big umbrellas on the sand, and then you can, it's basically for Instagram photos. Because what I realized is you go out there, it is hot. It is blistering hot. And the thing about tropical beaches, they're wonderful places to go, but you need the whole package. You need the ocean to swim in. You need the sand to lie on, but then you need more than just the sand. You need the trees to offer some shade, and then you need some little shops that can sell you cold drinks. Okay, that's the beach experience. That's paradise. But if you go out onto basically a sandbank out in the middle of the ocean, that's all you've got. Sand and water, and no shade, no shops, nowhere to get cold drinks. And then you go out there on a boat expecting to have this amazing day. You're going to spend the whole day out there in tropical paradise. Well, no, you're not, because the second you step off the boat onto that sand, you just start baking in the sun. And you can hide under the one umbrella that might be available. But man, it is so hot out there. And there's not a whole lot to do. You can hang out there for a little while. You can jump into the water. But there isn't really a coral reef out there or anything. So snorkeling is not that good because it's just sand everywhere. So anyway, you're out. You think you're going to be out there for 5 hours enjoying the day, but you're really going to be out there for an hour and a half at most. Take a bunch of pictures to make your friends jealous, to show how amazingly beautiful it looks. And then you get the heck out of there because it's just too hot. It's a fun thing to do, but not what you might expect. But anyway, I took pictures out there, and I had one picture of a sandbank with the blue ocean water and one umbrella. So that, to me, that conveyed tropical beach resort living. So that's the photo I chose for Ocean Planet. And then, because it's blue sky and blue ocean, it was a lot easier to put the word ocean across. So then I did the Mountain Planet, and that was the same thing. I had lots of pictures of mountains, but I kind of wanted it to look inviting. Like, I went to Nepal a long time ago. I've only been there one time. I keep thinking I should have been there a dozen times by this time in my life, but I've only been there once. And I went on a trek through the Annapurna region, the classic Annapurna circuit trek. That was my big Nepal experience. And I took a lot of pictures of mountain ranges. And I had one in particular. The quality of the photo that I have access to isn't that good, but it is quite a dramatic picture of the Himalayan mountains, basically. It looks beautiful, but it also looks like a place where you go to die, right? It looks like, okay, that looks cold and dangerous to go live in the Himalayan mountains. It didn't look like a place where people could live. So, looks beautiful, but I don't know, it's not not very inviting. So anyway, I kept looking and looking and looking, and I finally found a picture of the Canadian Rockies it's in a mountainous area, but it includes an island on a mountain lake with trees on it, and then high snow-capped mountains in the background. I thought, okay, this looks like a place where you could live next to this lake. There's trees there. So you're living it's a picture of the mountains, but it also has a little bit of a forest lake environment. So anyway, that's the one I chose there, and I put the word mountain on it. And then I did all of this work, and I was all done. And then the next day, I was looking at it, and it wasn't that clear to me because it just said forest, city, ocean, mountain. I was like, what the heck does that mean? And my whole theme was planet. This is a forest planet, an ocean planet. So then I went back over all of the photos, and I added the word planet underneath in small letters that are kind of spaced out. So now it says forest planet, city planet, ocean planet. And that took a long time to do because you don't want too much lettering, but you also want to be able to read it. And on the forest planet photo, you can't really see the word planet for some reason. I chose all kinds of different colors, styles, sizes, bold, italics, outline, no outline, different colors. But no matter what I did, it just didn't look good, or you couldn't really see it. But anyway, I eventually did something. The other ones were a little bit better. City planet was also a little bit hard to see. Ocean and mountain were more clear. So I had to do all of that work as well. And that took a very, very long time. But man, did I learn a lot. It was like, okay, now I'm becoming a Patreon expert. Now I know how creating tiers works. And because I had now physically created or digitally created tiers, that unlocked a whole bunch of other features on the Patreon. Because up until that point, there were all these menu systems, all of these options, all of these choices you can make that I couldn't do because they just weren't there. And they kept saying, well, you don't have any tiers, so you can't do this yet. So now that I had actually created tiers, now I had all these other options. So for example, if you post something like this audio podcast, I'm going to post it today to Patreon after I'm done recording. And then once you post it, now you have a menu where you choose where it goes. So this audio podcast, which tier has access to it? Which planet? Forest planet? Is it a benefit for the mountain planet? You choose from a drop-down menu. And you can make it, for example, I can decide now this podcast, who is it for? And I could choose to make it available. It's a very good system. I was so pleased to see this because up until I did this, my choices were very limited and they weren't logical. They made no sense at all. There was a drop-down menu, but the choice that I wanted wasn't there. And I thought, man, if those are my only choices, this isn't going to work. But now that I had tiers, it opened up a whole new menu system. So when you post something to Patreon, your post can be available to the public. And the public is everyone. They don't even have to join your Patreon. They have to have a Patreon account, I believe. Yeah, I think everybody, you have to have an account to even go to Patreon, I think. Or can you just go to patreon.com and see Patreons without opening an account? It's a very good question. I don't know that. But anyway, you can set your post to public, which means everybody can see it. Members of Planet Doug, non-members, free members, people who live on the forest planet, city planet, everybody. That's public. Then you can say, this is available to free members. Anybody who joined the Planet Doug Patreon for free will have access to the podcast. Or you can say only the mountain planet, people who live on the mountain planet, or only city planet. You can choose. Or you can say only free members, which is an interesting choice. They have an option where you can say only free members can see this and paid members can't. And I can't think of any reason why you would ever want to do that, except, I don't know, maybe you're speaking directly to free members and you're trying to convince them to become paid members, and then you have like a bonus thing just for them. Like if you join if you come live on the forest planet, you can get this, and you show them things that they can get. A gecko I have a room gecko. Kind of interesting. He lives behind the light switch during the day, and then for some reason, at night he lives behind the mirror. I'm not quite sure why. I guess he hunts, but I only see him behind the mirror or behind the light switch. Well, it's not really the light switch. It's the control box for the ceiling fan. And there's a gap behind it. And then he can go into that gap and hide in the wall, basically, during the day. That's where he sleeps. But then he comes out at night, lives in my room, and goes hunting all night. But I only ever see him at night behind the mirror. And I don't know why he's there, because there's no, no insects behind the mirror. They usually go up around the light on the ceiling, because that's where the bugs would go that they hunt. Anyway, hello, Mr. Gecko. Yeah, normally you have a whole bunch of geckos living in your room, but this one, I've only seen one. So what was I talking about with my Patreon tiers? Oh yeah, you can take your post and say only, or you can say all paid members, which is a very handy one for me, for example, because Forest Planet is the lowest tier, but everything that's available on the Forest Planet will also be available on the City Planet, and the ocean planet and the mountain planet. Because anybody who lives on the mountain planet, they have access to all the other planets. They can hop on their spaceship and go to the ocean planet and the city planet. And all the benefits and perks on those planets are also available on the mountain planet. So basically, anything on the forest planet, I would choose all members. That's right. Well, no, not necessarily. I would choose either all members or all paid members. If it's something I want available to the free membership, I choose all members. And then everybody who joins the Planet Doug Patreon has access to that item. Or I can choose all paid members, and then all of the tiers have access to it. Right. So anyway, it's very logical, it's very clear, and every choice that I might want to make is listed there. So it's quite well organized. So at some point, like I already have, I think, about 100 items already uploaded to Patreon. So now at some point, it's going to take me a whole day to do it probably. I'm going to have to go through all of the content on my Patreon, every post one by one, select it, and then set accessibility. Who has access to this post? Free members only, forest planet, city planet, all that kind of thing. Yeah. It's going to take a while. And the main problem with that, it's just a UI issue that in order to go back in time, it takes a long time. Like every time you do something in your Patreon, like you open up a post, edit that post, then you save it, you are automatically returned to the very top of your feed. The very, very top. So now in order to get to post number 2, I have to scroll all the way through my entire Patreon feed. And you have to click on the load more button every time, then wait for those to load. Then you have to go load more, load more, load. It takes minutes just to get all the way back down to the beginning of my feed. Then I click on the second post, set the tier access, save it, save my changes, and then I end up all the way back at the beginning again. And then I have to go load more, load more, load more, load more, all the way down. Then I can go to post number 3, open it, edit it, save the changes, and then I get kicked out and I'm brought all the way back to the beginning again. Oh, it's just, I mean, I understand why they do that, because most people, they don't do things the way I do them. No normal human being would post 100 things to Patreon before they even launch their Patreon. I've seen lots of Patreons out there that have been available for years, and they still haven't posted 100 items. And I haven't even launched my Patreon, and I already have 100 items uploaded. Audio, video, photos, links, all kinds of things. So a normal human being would not have to scroll through their Patreon feed as much as I do, as much as I'm going to have to. But this is all part of the setup process. Once I get everything set up, I don't have to do this ever again, but it is going to be a huge job. So yeah, I have to do that at some point. So what else? Oh yeah, then after I did all of that work, this was all being done on my Asus VivoBook, which is the laptop that I have right now. And my Asus VivoBook kept crashing because, as I've talked about, I was given this Asus VivoBook by a subscriber in Malaysia, and it was given to me with the understanding that, well, this is an older laptop. We're not talking about a brand new powerful machine. It's an older one, and if you think you can use it here, you can have it. But it turns out I can't edit video with it. It just can't edit video. It's too slow. It doesn't have the memory or the power to edit video, and it freezes up all the time. So even if you could run a very simple video editing program, you just can't do anything because you just sit there staring at the screen, waiting and waiting and waiting for it to unfreeze. And then lately, it hasn't been unfreezing. It will freeze, and I wait and I wait and I wait and I wait, and I go to the task manager to see, okay, what's frozen, why isn't running, what's going on, and then I'll get the blue screen of death. I'll get a message saying, oh, your computer has encountered a problem and needs to shut down, needs to reboot, needs to reinstall. And then this happens over and over again throughout the day. So it's a long time-consuming process. But anyway, I was doing all of this work on this Asus VivoBook, and this is getting so technical, but this is all behind the scenes. So that's one reason I like having a Patreon and having a behind-the-scenes podcast. I can talk about all these things to my heart's content, and then it's not like I'm forcing it on people on my YouTube channel. People have chosen to come to the Planet Doug Patreon, and then they have chosen to listen to this podcast. So, you are my audio prisoners right now, and I'm thinking about technology, so that's what I'm talking about. But anyway, it gets even more complicated because this was all on a laptop, but a lot of people would be looking at Patreon on their phones, and I've had a problem with that because I have the Patreon app on my phone, but I cannot access my Patreon through my app. Like, when you do this, you end up with two profiles. You have a member profile. So if I join someone else's Patreon, I join them with my member profile. But if you have your own Patreon, then you have a creator profile. So you choose what do you want to access, your member profile or your creator profile. But for some reason, in my Patreon app, I cannot access my creator profile. It's not there. So I haven't been able to do anything on my phone, and I cannot see my own Patreon because I can't access it. It's just so weird. It's so dumb. I don't understand what's going on, and I've spent so much time trying to fix this problem, maybe this isn't even a problem. Maybe this is how it's supposed to work. I don't know. But anyway, I read, while I was learning about Patreon and reading, I came across this idea that, I went troubleshooting. Like, I did this with an AI, actually, ChatGPT. I asked ChatGPT a question like, in the Patreon app, I am unable to access my creator profile. Like, how do I see my creator profile? And then ChatGPT gave me a lot of pretty good advice after scanning the internet. And it said, well, if you can't see it on the app, try using the browser. And I slapped my forehead again because I keep forgetting that this is a possibility. It goes both ways for me. If I'm looking at something on the browser, like I go to Google Chrome on my phone and I can't do something there, I always forget that quite often there's an app to do the same thing. Because on your phone, you have access to Google Chrome and you have access to apps. Sometimes the app works, sometimes the website works. And you can choose which one you want to use. And I completely forgot, again, that I could go to the Patreon website. So this time I went to my Patreon website, logged in to Patreon, and then I could get into the creator profile. And I could see all of Patreon on my phone for the very first time. I've essentially been working on Patreon part-time for years, going all the way back to the pandemic days in Thailand. And I've been working on it almost full-time for 2 months. And this is the very, very first time I could actually see my Patreon on a phone. And to be honest, that was a very bad strategy, because when you look at it on a laptop and then you look at the same thing on a phone, it changes everything. Everything looks different. Everything feels different. And then you realize it's like, most people, when they see your Patreon, they're going to see it on their phone. And this is what they're going to see. And then suddenly my Patreon looked very, very different. It looked too complicated. There were too many benefits, too many things in my feed, perhaps. And then I saw the advantage to other people's Patreon, where they kept it very simple, where all they do is once a month they post a bonus video. That's all they do. And then their Patreon feed, it kind of looks appealing, because as you scroll through it, you just see video after video after video, and you kind of, okay, that's what this is. It's a list of bonus videos. It makes sense to people. But when you look at my Patreon, you see all kinds of things. You see links to other people's YouTube videos. You see links to articles on the internet. You see audio files. You see links to my YouTube videos. You see 20-page written documents, my written journal. And you see photo posts where I'm talking about potato chips. You see photo posts where I'm talking about microphones, where I'm talking about sewing up my sandals and repairing my sandals. And I can see somebody saying, oh, wow, Planet Doug has a Patreon. Let me go look at it. And they start scrolling through it, and they're like, what the heck is this? Am I on Facebook? Am I on Instagram? Like, where am I? And what is this exactly? So it kind of looked different to me. And I was like, maybe my whole strategy of turning Patreon into a social media platform and turning it into a community, maybe that isn't the best approach. Because maybe it's too crowded on your smartphone. But anyway, that was just a thought. I didn't know for sure. Maybe I'm overthinking it, and maybe it's fine. But anyway, it did make me rethink my entire strategy. Step back for a minute. And that is, I guess, the end of my Patreon thoughts. I'm still planning to do a soft launch. So right now, to be honest, my Patreon is ready to go. The tiers are set up. Everything is organized. There's a few other things I want to do. I could hit launch it right now. I could just open up my phone or my laptop and just click on the button that says open Patreon, and it will be open for people to join. But I don't want to do that yet because, as I said, my plan is to have a soft launch where I want to educate people about Patreon first. So I want to announce it and then tell people about it and slowly show people what it's all about. So basically, I think what I'll do is I'll choose a launch date. Yeah, that's what I should do. Pick a date in the future and then make it a special day. And then when I announce it, I can say the Patreon will be open on this day and have the grand opening scheduled. Yeah, I never thought about that till just now. But yeah, so there should be a grand opening, a planet launch. And and then I can tell people about it. I can do screenshots in a video, like just show people what it looks like, give them a crash course in Patreon, because I think most people don't know anything about it. They don't know about the chat window, for example. They won't know about collections. They won't know that you can listen to audio. They don't know that there can be attachments that you can download. They don't know about all this stuff. So that's what I'm going to do. And then as I tell people about the Patreon, I can get feedback and I can still make changes. People can tell me, whoa, no, your podcast shouldn't be part of the Patreon. It should be, put it back on the Planet Doug BTS channel, the behind the scenes channel. Don't put it here. Oh no, we don't like this. We like this, but we don't like this. Or maybe tons of people will say, yeah, we really love to join your Patreon, but you don't have to give us so much. This is too much. Like, you don't have to put the relive segment and the Google Maps blue dot segment. You don't have to put that on Patreon. We'll join your Patreon anyway. You can put that back on your YouTube channel. You don't need to have it here to entice us. We're going to join anyway. So I don't really know. So anyway, as I said, after looking at my phone Patreon, I started to think, I think I may be offering too much, and I don't need to offer this much. I can reduce what I'm doing. So anyway, those are my thoughts right now about Patreon. I'm going to make a second cup of coffee, and I'll come right back, and I think I will talk about YouTube stories. So YouTube stories are up next. I'm back, coffee number 2. And with YouTube stories, I'm going to start with something quite positive. I've started following a Canadian moto vlogger. His channel is called Una Moto, and he's quite an interesting guy, Canadian from Abbotsford, just outside of Vancouver in British Columbia. And as I talked about in my last podcast, I can't think of his name. I think his name might be Eric. So I'll just call him Eric for now, but that might not be his name. But anyway, Eric got inspiration from people like Ewan McGregor and Charlie Boorman, who did the long way round and long way down and long way up, or whatever they were called, all those travel documentaries where they traveled around the world by motorcycle and through South America by motorcycle, had all these motorcycle adventures. And he drew inspiration from Itchy Boots for kind of the YouTube filming yourself side of things. And the inspiration grew and grew until he decided to do it himself. So he has set off on a ambitious motorcycle journey. His goal is to ride his motorbike from Vancouver to the northernmost tip of Alaska, then back down from Alaska all the way across North America, across Europe, across Asia, Indonesia, and then Australia, and then ending in New Zealand. And he's hasn't posted that many videos. Oh, I accidentally hit the play button on my phone. That's what happens when you're trying to deal with your phone with just one hand and record audio and drink coffee with the other. So he's got 5 videos where he was buying the motorcycle, getting it set up, getting all his gear, getting his motorbike license, things like that. And then he has 4 videos of him on the road. And in terms of his on the road videos, he might have taken too much inspiration from Itchy Boots, because he was inspired by the way she follows back country roads. Like, she never takes the main road if she can help it, or at least she never films it when she's on the main roads. She waits until she can get off and get onto like a mountain trail or a dirt road. She looks for the dirt and gravel and muddy roads and has her adventures that way. And Eric is inspired by that. So even though he's on the road for the very first time, he just got a motorcycle license for the very first time. His motorcycle and his gear, everything is unproven. So in my mind, it kind of makes a bit of sense to take it easy. like to ease into this experience. And I know from experience that you can stay on the main roads in British Columbia and Alberta and get fantastic scenery. Like even if you stick on the main highways, you're going to get gorgeous scenery of the Rocky Mountains. And maybe that would have been the wisest way to start heading north. But he went off-road right away. He went looking for some of the smallest roads he could find. And the Rocky Mountains, the western, well, all over Canada, you find logging roads because logging companies will need access to certain areas, and they'll build a dirt road to get in, cut down the trees, and then bring them out again. And then the road gets abandoned, but it still sort of exists as an old logging road. And Canada is full of those. And it looks like he sort of went off on one of these old logging roads. But in the videos I've seen, he struggled quite a bit. I'm really worried about his motorbike. It just, I don't know, there's something about the sound of the engine. It's got this puttery sewing machine, clickety-clackety kind of sound to it. And he's stalling all the time because he's on these very, very steep roads. Like, they're not roads, they're trails, basically, covered in rocks and logs and things. And then he comes to a stop. And I guess he doesn't, according to the comments that people are leaving, he doesn't quite have the technique down for how to ride a motorbike in these conditions in terms of feathering the clutch and keeping the revs high and all the things you're supposed to do to ride a motorcycle well in these conditions. He's not doing any of those things. So every time he hits one of these rocks and he slows down, the motorbike stalls. He's stalling all the time. And then he comes to a stop, and then he falls over, loses his balance. And in the very first video that I saw of him on this logging road, it ended on a cliffhanger. He fell over once on his motorbike. It wasn't a crash or anything. He just basically fell over. But then it was nearly impossible for him to pick the bike back up because of the weight of the motorcycle, just the style of it, his technique, and the fact that he was on this very steep grade. And while he's trying to pick up the motorbike, the wheels would just sort of spin out from under him or get dragged through the gravel and the rocks, and then he just couldn't get the bike back up. It was a real struggle. And then the first video ended with him having more of a crash. He was moving at a little bit of speed, and then he lost control and fell over into another ditch. And then he again had a heck of a time getting the motorbike back up. And then now the latest video that I watched kind of picked up after the crash, and the thumbnail image shows a crash, and it says, "It got worse." And then the video title is "Trapped Between Two Hill Climbs in the Canadian Wilderness." I like the video title because it's very accurate, because he'd gone up one very, very steep hill, down the other side, and now he had to go up another hill to keep going, but he couldn't make it up the second hill, and now he was sort of stuck. If he wanted to continue forward, he had to figure out a way to get his motorbike up that hill, and he tried, and he tried, and he tried, and he tried, and he couldn't make it. He just kept falling over, falling over, falling over. But if he decided to, if he gave up and turned around, now he had to go back up that first hill that he struggled with. So he really was trapped between these two hill climbs, and man, he had a lot of trouble. And it just sort of makes me think, as I said at the beginning, that maybe he could have eased into this a little bit more slowly. He may have started off asking a bit too much of himself. And as I was talking about, I think the itchy boots that we see now, Nora Lee, she wasn't that itchy boots at the beginning. The very first times she would have ridden a motorcycle, she also would have been sort of easing into it, didn't just dive into the deep end like this with a fully loaded motorcycle with 5 cameras and then instantly going down a logging road in British Columbia. I mean, that is something to take on. And yeah, he might have been, well, I mean, he got a good experience out of it, but it may have been too much. He may have been better off sticking on paved roads for his trip through Canada to get up into Alaska and just sort of, slowly graduate from paved roads to these logging roads. He kind of he dove right into the deep end, is what I'm saying. And as a YouTube experience, I'm quite interested in it as well, because he does have so many cameras running. I think he has, well, I counted them before, 4 cameras plus a drone plus his smartphone, and he's shooting video with all of them, and then has to put it all together with the video editing process. Man, that would be challenging. And yeah, it was kind of funny. There was one moment in the video when he turned around. He eventually gave up, and he did turn around, and he wanted to go back, retrace his route, and he got to the first hill that he had so much trouble with, and he had trouble at the beginning, but then he gunned it, like really revved up the motorcycle, and he made it up the hill. But as he was doing it, he played this really triumphant music, went on for a long time. He picked this audio precisely because he was doing it. He was getting up the hill, and this triumphant sound, like it was a huge achievement. And yet, to be honest, he was going back with his tail between his legs because he turned around, right? He took this road, and I guess the triumphant music would have been appropriate if he managed to keep going. But in fact, he had been defeated by this road and I think it was a very wise choice to turn around and go back. But I thought it was just kind of funny that he had this triumphant music, this soundtrack, and yet he had basically been defeated and was returning, going back the way he had come. But hey, he made it. And then he went back into a town, found a motel, and then checked into a motel. Man, I can't even imagine the relief he felt to get out of that situation, to get out of that logging country, and then back into the motel, take a nice shower, get Wi-Fi, and then basically get cleaned up, get rest up. There was one other element to his video that I thought was very typically YouTube, though, because he was riding through a gorgeous backcountry area, and he came across a stretch of mountain, a stretch of hillside that was logged. It had been logged, but there were still a lot of trees lying on the ground. So all the trees had been cut down. It was a logged area, and then there were a lot of trees still there that were just rotting. And then he made a real big deal out of this. So he talked a lot about what a waste it was to cut down all those trees and leave them there. But I don't know. My sense is the logging company pulled out the good trees. I mean, what they do is they clear cut. It costs a lot of money to go into a forest and only pick trees one by one and leave the other ones standing. So a logging company will just go in, clear cut the whole area. They pull out the best trees, the ones that can be used for lumber, and then all the small trees that they can't use economically, they just leave them on the ground, and then they rot, and they just leave them there. So that could be what happened. He also speculated that maybe there were pine beetles destroying the forest, and this was some sort of a preventive measure where they went in and just cut down all the trees to prevent the spread of the pine beetle or something like that. He didn't know. But then he flew a drone over this clear-cut area, and he played really, really sad, melodramatic music the whole time that he was filming this logged area. And of course, the clear message here was, aren't we humans terrible? Look at what we're doing to the planet. We're cutting down all the trees, and isn't this awful? Look at this horrible clear-cut area. And to me, it was, again, it was a little bit of a YouTube cheat, where perhaps it isn't that simple. I got a very clear lesson in this as a young man, and I've carried it with me my whole life. It's one of those things where you sort of get slapped in the face by reality, and a light bulb went off, and I've never forgotten this lesson. And this is sort of back in my university days, or very early, right after university, and I was a very young guy, and I was all about saving the world and saving the planet and worrying about humans are destroying the environment, on and on. We all have those periods in our lives, I think, when we are younger, and I would have reacted the same way as this guy. If I saw at that time logging, like clear-cut logging, I would have been horrified, and I would have talked about, oh, how we're destroying the planet, cutting down all these trees. And at the time, I was doing a little bit of wilderness canoeing, because in northern Ontario, there are thousands of lakes and rivers, and it's a very popular thing to get a canoe and go canoeing through these lakes and rivers. You can go out there for weekends or entire weeks or even months and just go wilderness canoeing. And I joined this club out of Toronto that went out on weekend canoeing trips in the wilderness. So I went out there, and I'm going through gorgeous forests, Canadian wilderness, beautiful forests, trees, I mean, absolutely stunning scenery. And of course, you have this natural instinct, this conversation comes up about, wow, how beautiful this forest is, and isn't it awful that we humans cut down all these trees and build houses out of them, and we should leave the forest untouched. And then there was like a professional guide was with us at the time, and then he talked to me at one point and said, to be honest, hey, like, you should know, this whole area has already been logged. This is secondary growth. And that was such a revelation to me, because I was looking at it like this was original forest that had never been touched by humans. But what I learned during these wilderness canoe trips is that all of this all the trees had been cut down at least once, maybe twice. So they'd clear cut this entire area, and everything I was looking at was a new forest that had grown up to replace the one that had been cut down. And it was just sort of like, oh, for Pete's sake, you know? Anyway, it was quite a revelation to me that, anyway, you cannot make assumptions about these things. You can't just go with your instincts, can't just go with your emotions. You can, if you want, go to the Rocky Mountains of Canada or anywhere in the north, fly a drone over an area where a logging company is working, play really sad music, and you can go on and on about how humans are destroying the environment, but you got to step back and look at the full picture. And I spent a summer working as a tree planter, so I know that it's heavily regulated in Canada, and when a company goes into a forested area, they can only clear cut specific areas that are designated for them. Okay, you can clear cut this area, and after you've cut down all the trees, then you have to pay to replant it. And then they hire companies like the one I was working for, and then an army of young people like me, we go in and get paid to replant that whole area, and it is all tightly controlled and regulated. So it isn't as obvious as you might seem. You can't just go to a clear-cut logging area and start crying crocodile tears about how we're destroying the environment. It is not that simple in any way at all. You've got to learn, you've got to wait until you get all the facts and truly understand the big picture of what's going on. But of course, for a YouTube video, you're flying a drone, you see a clear-cut area, okay, you're gonna fly your drone and play sad music, and yeah, that's just the way the way YouTube videos are, I guess, always looking for the overly dramatic angle. But anyway, yeah, I'm glad I had that experience in my lifetime, that I have spent time in the Rocky Mountains and worked for a tree planting company, and then going into wilderness areas and finding out that this, what's the word I'm looking for? I keep hesitating. I want to call it virgin forest, but it's not that. It's like the first growth, like untouched wilderness areas. There's a word for that, and I can't think of it right now. But anyway, I spent all this time canoeing through northern Ontario, and the whole time I was basking in this idea that I was canoeing through untouched wilderness, and contrasting that in my mind with areas that companies have logged. And it turns out that all that area, all of it had already been logged, and everything I was looking at was secondary growth that had grown in after the original trees had been cut down, of course. And of course, if you wanted to go deep into the whole, like all the environmental issues, there is this idea that forests have a natural cycle anyway in Canada of wildfires, lightning strikes, forests burn down, and then they regrow in the same place better than they were before, and on and on. I'm just saying that you can't just look at something and react with your emotions. You've got to get all the facts to understand what's going on. But anyway, yeah, Unamoto, I enjoyed that video very much. He's a very down-to-earth kind of guy. He's very honest about what he's doing, about his abilities. And again, from a YouTube experience, I have to wonder what it feels for him, because he invested so much of himself in this motorcycle, planning his trip, setting up the YouTube channel, learning how to film, all this stuff, and then he sets off, and his very first couple of days are just brutal, and he is completely defeated. And I'm wondering whether he's looking at his motorcycle and thinking, man, maybe I made the wrong decision. Maybe this is not the right motorcycle. Maybe it's not powerful enough. Because I was watching some other moto vlogging videos, another channel, these Americans that were on really rough roads in Africa, and they were riding dedicated off-road motorbikes, 600 cc, and they seem to be having a much easier time. And then I'm watching the latest videos from Itchy Boots in Turkey, and she's also riding a 600 cc bike, kind of a hybrid, I guess, dirt bike and road bike. But when I listen to the sound of her engine, it just seems like she has a lot of power. And this poor guy with his 300 cc Kawasaki, I think it's a Kawasaki, I don't know, it's feeling underpowered to me. Though I don't know if that's true, because, you know, Itchy Boots, she often rides a 300 cc. Her Honda, she rode all the way through Africa on a 300 cc motorbike. So I guess the power is there, but there's something about this guy's Kawasaki seems to be underpowered to me. Maybe it's got carrying too much weight. It's top heavy. I don't know. It just doesn't seem right to me. But anyway, it's taking him a lot. He's learning a lot. And then when you go into the comments, of course, for a video like this, you're getting experienced, or people who think they are experienced riders, and everybody wants to give him advice. Everybody wants to tell him everything he's doing wrong. And I wonder if that really starts to get to him after a while. Maybe it's taking the wind out of his sails. Like every time he posts a video, he'll get hundreds of comments. I mean, everybody is being well-intentioned. Every comment is like, oh, the reason you couldn't make it up that hill is because you did this with the clutch wrong, and you did this wrong with the gas. You got to keep your revs high, and you got to do this, and you got to stand up on the pegs, and you know, everybody is telling him over and over and over again everything he's doing wrong. And wonder if it's a little bit, wonder whether it's getting to him to get all, it's not negative feedback. People are trying to help him, but at the same time, nobody, I mean, you look at an Itchy Boots video, she must sit down, read the comments, and then every night she must go to bed thinking she is the most amazing person on the planet who does everything right, because her comment section is literally thousands of people just heaping praise on her, unbelievable amounts of praise, telling her how amazing she is and how inspirational she is and how incredible her videos are, and she can do absolutely no wrong. But then you get a normal guy like this guy, Eric, and his comment section is nothing but people telling him everything he's doing wrong and giving him advice that, oh, you should do this and you should do that. So I wonder, when he goes to bed at night, does he now dread looking at the comments on YouTube? He doesn't seem to reply to a lot of them. I think he does engage. Let me look at the most recent one. His most recent one, I should turn the volume off on my phone. So it's got 12,000 views, 383 comments. And if I click on the comments, yeah, he's not replying to the most recent ones. Even the like as a YouTuber, you can reply to the comments, or you can click on the thumbs up, or you can like it or something like that. So he's not engaging with all of those. But so here's like one comment. Somebody is saying, halfway through the video, you said it. Clutch control, clutch control, clutch control. Having been riding and racing for 50 years, clutch control is a huge thing. You're not the only YouTuber I watch, and not mastering clutch control. Always a finger on the clutch lever in technical terrain. So again, this guy says, oh, I've been riding motorcycles for 50 years, and my advice is always have a finger on the clutch lever. Anyway, it goes on and on and on. Everybody's giving him tips, giving him advice. Do this, do that. So someone says, for this type of riding, you really need to sort your gearing out and find the balance between road and trails. But anyway, I don't know. I have a lot of feelings for this guy, and I'm looking forward to following his journey. And he's just a nice guy. He's a normal, nice Canadian dude. And he's not pretending that he's more than he is or doing something more extraordinary than. He's just treating what he's doing. Listen, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm having a good time. I'm struggling. I'm trying to ride a motorbike around the world, and here's a video of me trying to do that. He's not being pretentious or trying to pull the wool over your eyes or anything like that. So even his video titles, where he says things like, I crashed. You click on the video, like 99% of YouTuber videos, the thumbnail, it tells you something dramatic happened, but in the video itself, you discover that nothing happened. This guy said, I crashed. You watch the video, oh yeah, he crashed. He's not lying to you in the thumbnail or in the description, and I really appreciate that. He doesn't set off my radar for all of my Planet Doug pet peeves. So Unamoto, I'm enjoying that channel quite a bit. And did I have another YouTube video to talk about? I had Unamoto, the Canadian moto vlogger. I'm enjoying that very much. Backpacker Ben in Myanmar. Oh, yes, Ccology, CK, who I met in Port Dickson, a very well-known Malaysian YouTuber. He focuses mainly on food, but he does make a variety of content. But I think he's known for the most part as a food vlogger. But he came down to Port Dickson and to make 2 videos. He was going to make one video about the food of Port Dickson and then one video about the attractions. And he's already posted his video about the food of Port Dickson. And I mentioned him because he contacted me. We were both there at the same time, and I went with him to a couple of places. So I went with him to the Coconut Bay restaurant. That was one of my favorite places in Port Dickson. And we went to this special Western restaurant. It was sort of outside Port Dickson, about 20 minutes away by car. And we went to a place that sold chendol. We went there together. And we went to the pineapple farm together. But the pineapple farm, that was part of the attractions. So he's already posted the food video, and I'm in his food video a little bit, but just recently he posted his Port Dickson attractions video, and it's now on the Seacology YouTube channel, if you go check it out. And I'm in that video a little bit. He calls me his guest host, but I think I'm only with him for one place in terms of the attractions, because I went with him to the pineapple farm, but he also went to the Port Dickson Aquarium, he went to the Army Museum, he went to Cape Rachado, and I'd already been to all of those places, and at the time I was busy doing other things, so I didn't go with him to those places. And he went to the ostrich show farm. And I never went to the ostrich show farm, but those are the places he went to: the Army Museum, Cape Rachado, the pineapple farm, and the ostrich farm, maybe, and the aquarium. Yeah, those are the attractions that he went to. But I'm only in the pineapple part. And I'm only in it very, very briefly. Occasionally, Seacology would turn the camera to me and say, "What do you think, Doug?" And I would say something. I have one longer part at the end, like his conclusion to the pineapple farm. He did turn to me and say, "So, Doug, what did you think of the pineapple farm?" And then he let me talk a little bit. He kept that in the video. And I just talked a little bit about what I thought of the pineapple farm, in particular about how I came to that farm expecting to have pineapple. Like, look at pineapples, see how they're cut, how they're grown, try some pineapple. And that was all I was expecting. But there was a lot more there because they make other products from the pineapple, like the pineapple husk and shells and the leaves and things like that. They weave things, and they make all kinds of other pineapple related products. So I said on his video, that's my takeaway from the place. But that was my big moment on his video. But yeah, so in my Port Dickson videos, of course, I make a separate video about every attraction. So I have a video about the Army Museum, one video about the aquarium, one video about Cape Rachado. But CK put them all together into one video. So it's fun, quick to watch, like 25 minutes long, and he covers all of the attractions of Port Dickson. So yeah, go check it out. And for this morning, last part of my podcast, Pop Culture Roundup. I mentioned in a previous podcast that I had been watching the TV show From, and I got frustrated with it and stopped watching it because it felt like a story where they're never going to explain the mystery. The mystery is just going to go on and on and on, and then none of it is going to mean anything. All these crazy things are happening, and they make it as wild and crazy as possible. And you think, well, someday they're going to explain what all these things mean. And I started to suspect that the writers, they're just making it up. There's no blueprint. None of this means anything. And at the end of the show, they're just going to invent it was all a dream. Oh, it was all an alternate reality. And they're just going to leave it at that. And they're not going to actually explain anything. And they stopped having a plot. nothing is happening anymore, and the entire episodes consisted of nothing but these characters yelling at each other and getting angry with each other and arguing all the time, and everybody is so unpleasant, and I don't understand it most of the time. It's like somebody in this village filled with monsters will have a terrible, terrible experience. Some crazy monster will attack them, nearly kill them, torture them, mentally torture them, do all these horrible things to them. And then this character will come back to the village and never tell anybody about what happened to them. People will say, "Where were you?" And they'll say, "I want to talk about it." Nothing. And none of the characters ever exchange stories. Like, I can guarantee that if I go outside into the forest and I'm attacked by a psychic monster and I'm tortured, or I go into a magic tree and the magic tree teleports me into a prison where I'm tortured, well, when I come back, I'm going to tell somebody the story. Someone says to me, "Oh, Doug, what happened to you?" I'm going to tell them what happened to me. But in this TV show, nobody ever tells anybody else what happened to them. It's just like, it's the weirdest thing. Even married couples, they just start screaming at each other instantly. As soon as two of them get in a room, they just start screaming at each other and arguing. And I don't know, it just doesn't make any sense to me. Like, okay, hold it a minute. You two are married, so you actually like each other. Each of you is the most important person in the other person's life, and this is how you treat that person? All you do is scream at them all the time and argue with them and not listen to them, and you guys don't share stories about your day? Like this married couple, they're the most frustrating ones. The two of them will separate, go off somewhere. Both of them will be attacked by insane monsters that torture them, and then they come back together at the house, and instead of telling their soulmate what happened to them, they just start screaming at each other and telling each other exactly what they're doing wrong. What are you doing? I don't know. It's the worst, one of the worst TV shows I've ever seen from that point of view. It makes no sense at all. So I stopped watching it. But then I read a couple of reviews where people said, "Oh, it got better. These characters became good again." So I thought, okay, maybe I'll give the show another chance. So I went back to watch a couple of episodes that I'd missed. But no, they didn't get better at all. All of the characters are just as annoying. All they do is shout at each other, argue with each other, scream at each other. Nobody ever talks. Nobody ever shares stories or information. It's like a horrible show from that point of view. Terrible writing. Anyway, so I do not recommend. I mean, the first season of From is a lot of fun. World building is fun. And we see this new world from the point of view of brand new characters who just arrive in this nightmare village. So it's first season is a lot of fun. But after that, it just goes downhill. But on the positive side, somebody I know recommended this show. Well, he said he was watching The Penguin, and he said it was pretty good. So I got hold of a copy of The Penguin, and I started watching it. And the first episode was amazing. It was so, so good. So I'm really looking forward to The Penguin now. And of course, it's a part of the Batman world set in the city of Gotham, where, there's a criminal underworld full of all these supervillains like the Penguin, the Riddler, the Joker, and Batman, of course, is fighting them. But this show is not about Batman. It's about the Penguin. It's an origin story for the Penguin, how the Penguin became the Penguin and became a powerful supervillain and a crime boss in Gotham City. And I was so pleased with the first episode. I thought it was so well done. The storytelling, the world building, the acting, The cinematography, everything about it I thought was excellent. They made so many good choices. So many choices could have been horrible, and they made good choices. I enjoyed it very much. So I am looking forward to diving deeper into the world of the Penguin. I hope the rest of the series maintains the level that they started with the first episode. Excellent, yeah. I like the Penguin very, very much. And that brings me to the end of the Planet Doug podcast for today, for Friday, November 22nd. And tomorrow, Saturday, November 23rd, I am taking a ferry to Port Dickson. I'm going to spend one night in Port Dickson. I don't have a place to stay there yet. I haven't booked a hotel room. I'll probably end up back at the Port Dickson Seafront Hotel. For low-budget hotels, there isn't much choice in Port Dickson. You've got the Seafront, you've got the Marvel place, sort of Marvel Airbnb, and then you've got a place called Surya, and you've got the Star Hotel. But for most of them, if you go onto Google Maps and click on any of these low-budget hotels, you get terrible reviews, just horrible reviews, especially for places like the Star. So I'll never, ever go to the Star based on those reviews. I'd like to stay at Marvel Airbnb, because it's right downtown. It's a very short walk from the dock. Assuming immigration lets me into the country again, it'll be very easy to walk from there to Marvel. But Marvel is like one of these Airbnb places where there's no staff, there's no front desk, there's no lobby. And you have to wait until like 3 or 4 in the afternoon, and then they send you a code in order to get in the door. Then you have to open a lockbox to get the key to your room. I just don't want to go through all that hassle. So many emails, so many messages, and I won't have access to Wi-Fi when I first arrive because I won't have data on my SIM card. So, and like I said, check-in I think isn't until 3. And you can't do early check-in because you have to wait until they send you the email. You just sit there waiting, worrying, like, are they going to send me the email, and will they send me the code? I don't like that at all. So Marvel is off the table. And the only other options maybe is Seafront Hotel, but it's a little bit outside of town. And then there's the Surya Hotel. I think it's the same owners. They own the Surya and the Seafront. So, yeah. I don't know if I trust the Surya. I've never seen a room there. I don't really want any surprises. And at least the Seafront, there's no surprise there. So maybe I'll book a room there in advance or wait until I arrive in Malaysia and then decide when I get there. All right, that is it. I have to actually do a little bit of packing right now, get organized for tomorrow, for my ferry ride back to Malaysia, and then from there to Jakarta to meet up with my mystery benefactor and, getting a brand new laptop. So that is very exciting. All right, that's it. Shutting down for this morning. As always, thank you for hanging out with me here on the Planet Doug podcast. Come back, and I will see you next time.